King Kong was real, and he was bigger than the movies ever imagined. 3 meters tall, that's 9.8 feet, nearly eye level with a basketball hoop. 300 kilograms of muscle, bone, and appetite. For over 2 million years, this giant ruled the forests of prehistoric Asia, the largest primate that ever walked the earth. Nothing could challenge it, nothing could threaten it. And then it vanished. What killed the real King Kong wasn't a predator, wasn't a volcano, wasn't humans with spears. It was something so simple, so almost embarrassingly mundane, that it makes the creature's power seem like a cruel joke. The most formidable ape in Earth's history was brought down by a mistake you might recognize from your own dinner table. First, let's clear up what this creature actually was, because Hollywood got it wrong. Gigantopithecus blacki wasn't a gorilla. It wasn't a human ancestor. Its closest living relative is the orangutan. The two lineages split somewhere around 10 to 12 million years ago, and while orangutans stayed in the trees and kept their size manageable, Gigantopithecus chose a different path: maximum size, ground-dwelling dominance, absolute physical supremacy. Their kingdom stretched across what is now southern China, particularly Guangxi province, and into northern Vietnam. Picture a landscape of jagged limestone peaks, mist-filled valleys, and dense subtropical forests. Karst terrain, riddled with caves that would later preserve their remains. For most of the Pleistocene epoch, this was a stable paradise. Evergreen forests, abundant vegetation, reliable water sources. Gigantopithecus shared this world with stegodon elephants, giant tapirs, ancestral pandas, and massive porcupines. But none of them mattered. When a healthy adult G. blacki moved through the forest, everything else simply got out of the way. They were perfect for a world that never changed. But worlds always change. And when this one did, everything that made Gigantopithecus invincible would become its death sentence. Let's talk about size, because the numbers still don't quite land until you visualize them. Standing upright, Gigantopithecus blacki reached approximately 3 meters, 9.8 feet. A silverback gorilla, the largest living primate, tops out around 1.8 meters when standing. Gigantopithecus was nearly twice that. Weight estimates range from 200 to 300 kilograms, or 440 to 660 pounds. That's roughly 1.5 silverbacks, or about 4 adult humans stacked into one frame. Males were substantially larger than females, about 40% bigger based on jawbone comparisons. This kind of sexual dimorphism usually indicates intense competition between males, probably involving displays of strength, deep vocalizations, and physical confrontations. But here's an interesting detail. Their canine teeth were relatively small and blunt. They weren't fighting with their mouths. With bodies that massive, they didn't need to. Despite occasional artistic depictions of Gigantopithecus charging through forests on 2 legs, they almost certainly spent most of their time on all 4s. At 300 kilograms, sustained bipedal walking would have destroyed their joints. They likely knuckle-walked like gorillas, or moved on their fists like orangutans do when they're forced to the ground. But they could stand. When a 3-meter shadow rose from the bamboo to survey its territory or reach a high branch, nothing in that forest would have challenged it. Here's the reality that movies always get wrong. Gigantopithecus wasn't a roaring, chest-beating monster, it was a vegetarian. It spent most of its waking hours sitting, eating, and digesting, slow, deliberate, energy-conserving. A gentle giant in the truest sense, unless you happen to be a plant. If you'd encountered one, you wouldn't have fought it. You'd have simply reconsidered your life choices and backed away slowly. Fortunately, the last one died about 215,000 years before any of us were born. But size was only half the equation. The real engineering marvel was hidden inside their skulls. The jaw of Gigantopithecus blacki wasn't just big, it was a precision instrument. Millions of years of evolution focused on a single purpose: turning tough, fibrous plants into usable energy. Start with the enamel. Gigantopithecus possessed the thickest tooth enamel, of any primate ever documented, up to 6 millimeters in some areas. Human enamel averages around 2.5 millimeters, less than half. This wasn't decoration, this was armor. When you spend your entire life grinding bamboo, cracking hard seeds, and processing bark, your teeth need industrial-grade protection. Then there's the bite force. Biomechanical analysis of their jaw structure suggests Gigantopithecus could generate approximately 6,300 newtons of force. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to a hippo, one of the most powerful bite forces of any land animal alive today. Except hippos use that force to fight crocodiles and intimidate rivals. Gigantopithecus used it to chew vegetables. Nature doesn't over-engineer without reason. When you weigh 300 kilograms and survive entirely on plants, you need equipment that can handle volume. Their molars were massive, with flat, broad grinding surfaces and low, blunt cusps. Not teeth designed for cutting or tearing, but for crushing. Biological millstones that could reduce bamboo shoots, tough seeds, and woody stems to digestible paste. The mandible, the lower jaw, was extraordinarily deep and thick, providing anchor points for enormous chewing muscles. This wasn't a creature that took delicate bites. This was a processing plant. 6,300 newtons, hippo-level power, in a creature that ate salad. Let that sink in for a moment. This jaw was built for one job, turning forest into fuel. And for 2 million years, it did that job better than any primate before or since. Perfect engineering for a perfect niche, as long as that niche never changed. Here's where the story starts to turn, and it begins with chemistry. Scientists can read ancient diets from teeth. Specifically, they analyze the ratio of carbon isotopes, carbon-12 versus carbon-13, preserved in tooth enamel. Different types of plants have different isotopic signatures. Forest vegetation, trees, shrubs, fruits, bamboo, are classified as C3 plants. Grasses, particularly tropical grasses, are C4 plants. The results from Gigantopithecus teeth are unambiguous. They ate C3 plants exclusively, forest food only. Fruits, when available, bamboo shoots, tender leaves, seeds from the forest canopy. This was their menu. This was their entire menu. What they did not eat, ever, under any circumstances, was grass. Even when grasslands began expanding into their territory, even when C4 plants became the dominant vegetation in some areas. Gigantopithecus looked at the grass, looked at the shrinking forest, and chose to starve on bark rather than try something new. And here's the metabolic trap that made this choice fatal. Being a giant is expensive. A 300-kilogram body requires an enormous daily caloric intake. Estimates suggest Gigantopithecus needed to consume roughly 50 kilograms of vegetation every single day. That's about 110 pounds. Half your body weight in salad, every day. No weekends off, no fasting. Miss a few meals, and you start burning through reserves that a body that size simply cannot afford to lose. When their preferred foods became scarce, Gigantopithecus didn't adapt. They turned to what scientists call fallback foods, emergency rations, bark, woody stems, fibrous roots. Their magnificent jaws could process this material. Their bodies couldn't thrive on it. It's the equivalent of surviving on cardboard when there's bread right next door, but refusing to try the bread because you've never eaten bread before and you're not about to start now. Here's the bitter irony. Their closest relatives made the opposite choice. Pongo weidenreichi, an ancient orangutan species, lived in the same forests at the same time. Same family tree, same starting conditions, but when resources got tight, orangutans adapted. They ate fruits when available, leaves when necessary, bark in emergencies, insects if they had to. They stayed flexible. They stayed in the trees where food variety remained higher. They survived. Gigantopithecus was a specialist. One menu. No substitutions. No exceptions. Their cousins were generalists. And in evolution, when the world changes, generalists tend to outlive specialists. They were masters of a world that was about to change. And they had no backup plan. For most of their 2 million year existence, Gigantopithecus lived in a stable world. The forests of southern China were dense, evergreen, and reliable. Fruit seasons came and went predictably. Bamboo groves regenerated. Water was abundant. It was the kind of environment that rewards specialization. Why bother being flexible when your niche provides everything you need forever? Then the climate began to shift. Starting around 600,000 to 700,000 years ago, something changed. Global climate patterns became more variable. In southern China, seasonality intensified. The difference between wet seasons and dry seasons grew more extreme. Dry periods lasted longer. The dense evergreen forests that Gigantopithecus depended on began to fragment. Grasslands expanded. Open woodlands replaced closed canopy. The foods that had sustained the giants for millions of years became seasonal first, then scarce, then absent entirely. The extinction window, the period during which Gigantopithecus disappeared, has been narrowed by recent research to between 295,000 and 215,000 years ago. This wasn't a sudden catastrophe. This was a slow squeeze, lasting tens of thousands of years. Two close relatives faced this same challenge. They made very different choices. The orangutans adapted. Their bodies became smaller over time, less mass to feed. Their diets became more flexible. Anything edible was acceptable. They stayed in the trees, where patches of suitable habitat persisted even as the ground-level environment transformed. They're still here today. Gigantopithecus didn't adapt. They maintained their massive size despite shrinking food supplies. They maintained their specialized diet despite watching their preferred foods disappear. They couldn't climb efficiently, too heavy. They couldn't travel far to find new food sources, too slow, too energy-intensive. They were trapped by their own magnificence. The evidence of their suffering is written in their teeth. Dental microwear analysis, studying the microscopic scratches and pits left by food on tooth surfaces, shows a dramatic change in late-period Gigantopithecus specimens. Deep scratches, heavy pitting. The signatures of eating gritty, abrasive, low-quality food. They were chewing bark, roots covered in dirt, whatever they could find that wasn't grass. Even more damning, enamel hypoplasia. These are visible bands and pits in the tooth enamel, permanent scars that form when the body is so stressed it temporarily stops growing teeth properly. Severe malnutrition, chronic illness, prolonged periods of starvation. Their teeth are biological diaries, and the entries from the final chapters are heartbreaking. Hungry, stressed, weakening generation by generation. They had survived for 2 million years, but they couldn't survive a menu change. So what killed the real King Kong? Not predators. Nothing in their ecosystem could threaten a healthy adult Gigantopithecus. Even the largest carnivores would have looked at a 3-meter, 300-kilogram ape and chosen an easier target. Not humans. Homo sapiens didn't reach this part of Asia in significant numbers until after Gigantopithecus was already gone or nearly so. We didn't hunt them to extinction. We arrived too late for that. Not a volcanic eruption. Not an asteroid. Not a sudden catastrophe that wiped them out overnight. The simple mistake that killed the real King Kong was this: they were picky eaters. That's it. That's the whole tragedy. The most powerful jaws in primate history, a body that nothing could threaten. 2 million years of evolutionary refinement, and they starved to death surrounded by food they refused to eat. Grass spread across their homeland, and they ignored it. Their orangutan cousins tried new foods and survived. Gigantopithecus chewed bark and withered. One seasonal famine at a time, one generation slightly weaker than the last. The stress scars accumulating on their teeth like rings in a dying tree. The most physically powerful ape in Earth's history wasn't defeated by something stronger. It was defeated by a menu preference, not weak, not stupid, just inflexible. In evolution, sometimes being perfect is the worst thing you can be. Perfect for a world that no longer exists means perfectly doomed in the world that replaces it. The last Gigantopithecus blacki didn't die in battle. It probably didn't die dramatically at all. Picture an old male, fur patchy and thin, sitting alone at the edge of a shrinking forest. Around it, grasslands stretch toward the horizon. Food it could eat, if only it would, but it won't. It never learned how. It never needed to. It chews another strip of bark because there's nothing else it will eat. Its teeth ache. Its stomach is never full. And eventually, quietly, there are none left. Specialization is a gamble. Evolution rewards specialists. It refines them, perfects them, makes them dominant in their niche. But niches don't last forever. Climates shift, forests shrink, food sources disappear. And when they do, the specialists, the ones who traded flexibility for perfection, are the first to go. The generalists survive. The adapters, the ones willing to try something new when the old ways stop working. We see echoes of this story in the modern world. Giant pandas, locked into a bamboo diet. Elephants, requiring vast territories that shrink every year. Specialized creatures evolved for stable worlds, living through an era of rapid change. The lesson from 215,000 years ago hasn't changed. Flexibility beats perfection. Here's what remains of the real King Kong. Approximately 2,000 teeth and 4 partial jaw bones. That's it. No complete skeleton, no skull, no limb bones. The largest primate that ever lived left behind less physical evidence than some humans leave in their kitchen trash. We know them almost entirely from their magnificent teeth, the same teeth that recorded their slow decline. They ruled for 2 million years. They fell because they wouldn't eat grass. Let that be the epitaph for Gigantopithecus blacki. Too powerful to be killed, too stubborn to survive. What do you think was the true tragedy? That they couldn't adapt, or that they wouldn't? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time.